Hey, everybody, real quick. If you need a recap of Cobra Kai Season 5, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right hand corner, and it'll take you right to it. Now, Season 6 picks up with really good vibes in the Valley. Johnny and Carmen are getting ready to welcome their new child. Most of the kids are getting ready to apply for colleges. Chosen is living with Daniel and Amanda. But everybody has one goal in mind, getting ready for the Saikai Taikai. And now, without John Kreese or Terry Silver to deal with, it seems like it should be pretty smooth sailing for Miyagi-Do / Eagle Fang, whatever they decide to call it. But both main senseis, we're talking Daniel and Johnny, have big plans for the Saikai Taikai. They feel like if they end up winning this thing, it could send their karate global. So you've got Miyagi-Do going worldwide, and Johnny has aspirations of getting Eagle Fang worldwide. While he's agreed to work with Daniel, he hasn't forgotten his mentality of aggressive teaching. In fact, before they head over to Miyagi-Do, Johnny decides to drive Miguel and Robbie over to his old dojo, that random abandoned building. They're going to break some bricks the old-fashioned way, Rocky IV style. They get bad news, though. The place has been torn down. So they just have to head on over to Miyagi-Do. And it's not like they aren't all getting used to each other. I mean, this is a typical friends become enemies, enemies become friends become enemies again situation. But for the current moment, it's all big one happy karate family, and they don't have to deal with Cobra Kai anymore. But with this new family comes a new name, and most of the kids have decided that the new name of the dojo is going to be Miyagi Fang. And when I tell you that this logo is terrible, it makes Mr. Miyagi look like he was a character in Morbius, that horrible, horrible Marvel movie. And when Daniel sees it, he says, oh, absolutely not. He gets together with Johnny and Chosen and says, there is no way that I am allowing Mr. Miyagi to look like that on a poster. But for Johnny, he actually likes it. He feels like they'll be able to come to some kind of compromise, but Chosen, who sides with Daniel, is more stern about the fact that they're not doing this Miyagi Fang. No way. Chosen, though, takes it one step further. He says that the dojos should be called Miyagi-Do because that's the correct way of teaching karate. And he does make a good point. He says, well, it's not like Eagle Fang has an actual dojo to train at. Miyagi-Do is the only place. But this pisses off Johnny. The two get into a squabbling match, and they decide to settle it the next day on the mat. Nothing like a 65-year-old going against a 45-year-old with a bad back. As those two guys go to the store to grab some Bayer aspirin and Bengay, that night there's a little Miyagi Fang bonding experience when it comes to Miguel and Sam, who go on a double date with Robbie and Tori. And for both Robbie and Miguel, they thought it'd be a good idea, but for Sam and Tori, it's awkward. Yeah, they're working together currently, but it's not like they're friends. And they're definitely not double date friends. But while the group bounces through the arcade and they try to be cordial with one another, Robbie sees Kenny shooting hoops by himself. And Robbie knows that Kenny needs to be a part of this new dojo. Yes, they've had their differences, but he hasn't forgotten the promise he made to Sean to look out for his little brother. So later in the night, he approaches Kenny, but Kenny has really no interest in talking to Robbie. He blows him off. Robbie persists, though. He tries to get Kenny to listen to him, and he starts to explain how this new dojo would be better for him. And that's when he gets a big surprise, because Sean tells him to back off. Robbie had no idea that Sean was out. And he tries to explain his side of the story that, yeah, he made some mistakes by getting Kenny involved in Cobra Kai, but he's trying to rectify that. Sean, however, doesn't want to hear any of it. He feels like his buddy from juvie just took his little brother down a bad path, and now that he's out, he doesn't need Robbie. So his message to Robbie is pretty clear. Stay away from my brother. And Robbie has every intention of honoring that. At least for 5 minutes, until he sees Sean and Kenny out in the batting cages and decides to shoot a shot one last time to get Kenny involved in Cobra Kai. The conversation, though, goes from Robbie talking to Kenny to Robbie strictly talking to Sean. Sean telling Robbie to back off, and Robbie saying, no, dude, I'm not going to. Your brother has so much pent-up anger, and if he lets it out in the wrong way, he's going to end up where we ended up, in juvie. Do you want that? When Sean tells him that it's not his concern, Robbie says, no, I disagree with that. And of course, they have to get into a fight. Unlike in juvie, Robbie doesn't strike first. He waits, but he defends himself. Miguel jumps in, but he does the same thing. Even Tori and Sam jump in. And in the end, it's pretty clear that Sean and Kenny are no match for Sam, Robbie, Miguel, and Tori. Even though all four of them kind of took it easy on them. They really just defended themselves. But Sean, realizing that they're going to lose this fight if they continue it, decides, you know what, it's not worth it. Let's just get out of here. And he leaves. He does, however, have to have a conversation with his brother because he did notice the fact that Robbie, Miguel, even the girls, they had open shots to take and they didn't take them. And he has noticed that his brother is really, really aggressive. So while he wanted Robbie to stay away, he encourages his brother to go and visit this new dojo, see what Robbie's talking about. Maybe it could be some good because he clearly has seen a change from the Robbie he knew in juvie. As most of the kids were getting into a fight that day, Daniel was trying to stop one. He went over to both Chosen and Johnny. He pitched them on not doing this stupid fight and just realizing we're all working for the same side, but neither one of them wanted to hear it. And when Daniel gets home, he starts telling Amanda, I don't know if this tournament's worth it. I mean, we entered the Saikai Taikai to stop Terry Silver, but he's out of our hair, and maybe going into this is going to really pull us apart. And that's when Sam walks to the door. She doesn't tell her parents exactly what went down, but she does say, it's weird. Me and Tori, feels like we crossed a little bit of a bridge. And it looks like now we have two bonsai badasses that could kick the competition's ass. And when Daniel hears all that, he thinks it could be a really good counter-argument for staying in the tournament. And while they thought that they won't have to deal with Cobra Kai in the Saikai Taikai, they might just have to, because as Johnny was leaving the hardware store where he was buying an axe, an actual axe, he got a text from an unknown number that said, show up at Coyote Creek. And he was convinced that it was John Kreese. But when he shows up, it's not John Kreese. It is Stingray. Stingray teaching karate to a bunch of middle schoolers under the Cobra Kai banner. He texted Johnny because he wants Johnny to help him. He wants to bring Cobra Kai back to the glory days, and he feels like Johnny is the best person to do that with. But Johnny's not interested. Cobra Kai almost ruined his life. He wants to leave that thing in the past. Even though Johnny doesn't want to, Stingray continues to pitch him on the idea of joining forces. Because he tells Johnny, Cobra Kai was awesome when you ran it. I mean, I know the way people look at me, but you probably thought the same thing, but you let me stay. You taught me so much, and it got to the point where I actually started liking the person I saw in the mirror. That was cool. He reminds Johnny that they still have a spot in the Saikai Taikai for Cobra Kai. And to win the Saikai Taikai, you're going to need a badass sensei. And he doesn't think Daniel LaRusso is it, but he certainly thinks that Johnny Lawrence is. But unfortunately for Stingray, Johnny's a changed man. And the next day, when it comes time for that big showdown with Chosen, he shows up and he concedes. He gave it a lot of thought and he realized that Eagle Fang is just another version of Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is John Kreese's legacy. He doesn't want to be a part of that. Plus, he's realized that working with Chosen and Daniel, it's made him a better sensei. He's willing to do whatever it takes to lead Miyagi-Do to victory. And he wants to make sure that it's Mr. Miyagi's legacy that lives on, not John Kreese's. Well, I'd love to tell you that they still didn't fight. They did. I don't know who won. It doesn't really matter. The dojo is once again united, and they get a new member. Kenny shows up the next day for training, and he's welcomed in with open arms. But while they train, John Kreese is laying the groundwork. He shows up in Korea. He interrupts a karate class where he tells them, tell Kim Daeon that Cobra Kai is back. In episode 2, John Kreese links up with Kim, and he's known her since she was a little girl. He learned how to do karate from her grandfather. So these two are old friends. But because John Kreese was behind bars, when Kim came over to help Terry Silver, he unfortunately didn't see her. She tells him that she came over to the States because she was blinded by the promise of bringing her grandfather's karate to the world, but that wasn't the case. And Kreese stops her and says, well, it still can be. Cobra Kai has earned a spot in the Saikai Taikai, so let's go win it. And while she would say yes, her grandfather, on the other hand, he's a different story, and Kreese is going to have to win him over. He pitches Master Kim on going to the Saikai Taikai as Cobra Kai, but Master Kim just says no. He starts blaming his granddaughter for the promises that she made when she left for America, the promises that she didn't keep because of Terry Silver. And he even gets pretty personal with his attack, saying, this is why you're never going to be a master. Kreese, however, continues to pitch Master Kim on the idea of going to the Saikai Taikai, but Kim laughs him off, and at one point he says, you were never a good student, in fact, you're not a good sensei. To which Kreese says, I'm not a good sensei, well, Did she tell you how one of my students dominated 4 of your students? And Master Kim actually likes this little bit of gumption, so he says, you know what? Yeah, I'll give you a chance. He sends Kreese on a death mission to find his family knife. This knife is located deep in the jungle in a cave that's protected by a cobra. And when Kreese gets there, he tries to grab the knife, but the cobra strikes and bites Kreese. And the poison quickly starts to take effect. He starts to have a fever dream. It's as if he's Ebenezer Scrooge and he's visited by 3 ghosts, one of them being Terry Silver, the other one being a young Johnny Lawrence. A lot of soul searching going on in this fever dream. But after fighting off his demons, he heads back in that cave. He is able to get the knife, and he's even able to cut the head off the cobra. And he wins Master Kim's blessing. Now, as for life in the valley, it is college application season, and Miguel has his eyes set on Stanford University. He's written his letter. He's planning on doing early acceptance. But he also knows that he probably should prepare for a safety school. One of the reasons why is because Johnny and his mom, they're broke. The apartment they live in just had a little bit of an issue when a septic pipe leaked and burst into their living room. They currently don't really have a place to live. And it's not like you can get a Stanford education via Groupon. So Miguel, who wants to go to Stanford, and Dimitri and Eli, who have aspirations of MIT, decide to go and check out the local college. And they happen to run into 2 old acquaintances, Kyler and Brooks. But the old bad blood that they had for one another is water under the bridge. Brooks and Kyler are actually happy to see Miguel, Dimitri, and Eli. So much so that they invite him to a frat party that night. Kyler's one of the pledges. And as Miguel, Dimitri, and Eli are enjoying the ambiance, they just can't believe that Kyler has seemingly landed on his feet. He seems to be owning this college. That is until they see how he's treated as a pledge. It's as if Miguel has never heard of Greek life. He's shocked at how poorly Kyler is treated, but yet also amazed at how he just accepts it. Miguel approaches Kyler and is like, dude, that's really not cool what they're doing to you, but Kyler brushes it off and says, that's just the way they are, man. It's all right. Once I get into this fraternity, life will be good. Don't worry about it. But later on in the party, Miguel overhears 2 frat brothers say that they're not planning on inviting Kyler into the frat. They're really just using him as slave labor. And later that night, when they make Kyler eat food off the floor, Miguel steps in and says, guys, tell him the truth. And that's when the fraternity brother tells Kyler, yeah, we had a good run, but there is no way we were ever going to allow you in this frat. When Kyler hears this, he tells him, you're lost. But then he dumps a beer on him. Because Kyler, knowing karate, knows he can kick this guy's ass, and he does. All of the karate kids start a brawl in this frat house, and shockingly, they all win. They wipe the floor with these frat boys. At the end of the night, Kyler and Miguel actually go and grab a bite to eat. And Kyler confides in Miguel that he had these goals and these dreams, but he didn't stick to them. And he really regrets slacking off in life. And his advice to Miguel is, the safety school is always going to be there. Chase after the dream school. The 2 of them, though, get interrupted by a couple of other Greek members, but these guys are nice. They overheard of what happened at the frat house, and they actually invite Kyler into their fraternity. Because, well, they could probably use his particular set of skills. As Miguel was going to check out safety schools, Johnny was trying to find him a place to sleep. That septic pipe damage is brutal. He heads on to the LaRussa household and he tells them all about the burst pipe and how right now he's got a bunch of people crashing in his tiny little apartment and he's hoping to find something better. And Johnny suggests bringing Chosen because he watches all these shows like Selling Sunset and Property Brothers. So Johnny and Chosen spend the day trying to find Johnny a rental property, and it does not go well. The first place they check out, Johnny loves, but he insults the realtor. And the second place they go, Johnny also likes, but it's the same realtor. And after the insult that Johnny gave him in the previous house, the realtor tells him, I'm never renting a house to you, ever. It's worth mentioning this realtor is a dickhead. But he's also completely clueless on who Johnny Lawrence is. And as luck would have it, the guy who actually owns the house is well aware of Johnny Lawrence and the lore of the All Valley tournament. He watched Johnny win it years ago. In fact, he's actually kind of starstruck. Johnny pitches this guy on being the renter of his house. Unfortunately, Johnny's credit is horrible and he doesn't exactly have a bunch of money. So the guy tells him, look, with a steady income and a solid deposit, I'll rent you a house. I have a couple of them, so let's just stay in touch. Now for Johnny, it's just a matter of finding a steady income, which he doesn't have. Later that day, he heads to Daniel's because he feels like he's owed some back pay for being a sensei, and he wants Chosen's rate. He finds out that Chosen isn't paid. If they win the Saikai Taikai, he can get paid, but that's months down the line, and he needs money and a steady income today. Daniel tells him maybe it's time he just does what he does and gets a 9 to 5, but the way that Johnny interprets that is that Daniel's offering him a job. So the next day, he shows up in a suit and a tie, and he's ready to work at LaRussa Auto. Daniel, recognizing that Johnny's pretty hard on his luck at the moment, doesn't want to just turn him away. He wants to find him a job, but Johnny finds his own job because he ends up selling a car. And the person he sells it to gives Johnny a glowing recommendation. So the steady income appears to take care of itself because you're looking at the new sales associate at LaRussa Auto, John Lawrence. In episode 3, it's time to find out the gender of Johnny and Carmen's baby. They have plans on doing this big gender reveal party, but it kind of gets ruined because a package gets delivered early, the boys hear ticking, they get curious, they open it up, and they find out that it's a girl. Yay! That's cool. So Johnny's officially going to be a girl dad, and the best news is he's got plenty of opportunities to practice with Devin, with Sam, and with Tori. But he's noticed something with Sam and Tori. Since they've kind of found this common ground, they've lost that edge, that eye of the tiger, if you will. And it's not just Johnny who's noticed it. Devin notices it too. She turns to both Daniel and Robbie and says, "What the hell did you guys do?" And the boys take no responsibility. They just say, well, they're friends now. But Devin knows that this is a recipe for disaster, and so does Johnny. They know that if these two don't go hard in training, then they're going to get their ass kicked at the Saikai Taikai. So they have to formulate some kind of plan to get these girls angry. And Johnny thinks he has the perfect plan. He's going to enact it that night. He's going to host a slumber party. While Johnny and Devin prepare for this slumber party that they're going to host, Daniel's making space in the Miyagi shrine for Chosen. Amanda's kind of pressured him to get Chosen out of the house, and he doesn't want to totally kick him out, so this is the next best option. So it forces Daniel to pack up Mr. Miyagi's things, which he doesn't really like doing. And as Chosen and Daniel are moving the bed, they notice that there's a hidden compartment built into the floor. Daniel has certainly never noticed it before, and when he opens it up, he finds a chest. At first, Daniel, who has the utmost annoying respect for Mr. Miyagi, doesn't want to open up this chest. And Amanda says, "That's ridiculous, Daniel. He's not here anymore. Even though it's his stuff, we have to open it." Amanda's able to convince both Chosen and Daniel to open up the safe, and when they do, they find a ton of artifacts in there. There's a newspaper clipping from 1947 about how a guy was hospitalized and got beat up pretty good for a valuable necklace. And in that article, the attacker is a guy named Keisuke Miyagi. Chosen and Daniel start trying to figure out who this guy is. Maybe it's Mr. Miyagi's brother, but neither of them knew that Mr. Miyagi had a brother. They then find a passport for a guy that clearly is Mr. Miyagi. I mean, the picture is identical, but the dates are wrong. It says that Mr. Miyagi was born in 1918 when Daniel thinks he was born in 1924. And Amanda has to let him know, Daniel, believe it or not, people do lie about their age quite a bit. With the passport comes an address, and they decide that if Mr. Miyagi did in fact live there, maybe they can go poke around and find out more information about him. Because it's obvious that Daniel didn't know everything about his mentor. The address leads them to a boxing gym in a seedy part of town. And when they ask for the owner takes off running. That's because the owner thinks that Daniel's a member of the feds and, well, he's back on his taxes a little bit, doesn't really feel like paying him. I don't blame him. Daniel and Chosen have to literally tackle this guy, explain they aren't the feds. They're just there to talk about Mr. Miyagi and his connection with this place. The good news is the guy does know who Mr. Miyagi is, because around those parts, Mr. Miyagi's a legend. Turns out Mr. Miyagi was a silent partner in this boxing gym, and he was really, really close with the current owner's grandfather. Daniel can't quite figure out, though, why Mr. Miyagi would use this place as an address and why he would have a fake name. And the guy that runs the gym lets him know that usually that's an indication people have something to hide. Daniel takes offense to this and says back, Mr. Miyagi had nothing to hide. And the guy that runs the gym says, well, then why did he flee the country? Miyagi fled America because of something about a robbery? He needed my grandfather to help him get lost. That's when Daniel pulls out the newspaper clipping from the 1940s and the story connects. Mr. Miyagi was clearly the guy that stole the necklace. The owner of the gym can tell that Daniel's really upset about this, and he says, look, man, we all make mistakes. Your guy messed up, but all I can tell you is my grandfather trusted Miyagi with his life, and he didn't throw that kind of praise around. When Daniel gets home later that night, he's still shook by this revelation. The idea that Mr. Miyagi wasn't the choir boy? Oh my God. Daniel's just having a really, really tough time with the fact that his mentor made a mistake roughly, carry the 5, add the 2, 77 years ago. I mean, folks, Daniel is legitimately hurt he feels lied to. And Amanda and Chosen both try to make him feel better. They remind him of the fact that Mr. Miyagi was a good man, but now Daniel's kind of questioning everything. As Daniel was finding out that Mr. Miyagi was the bad boy from Okinawa, the bad boy from the Valley, Johnny Lawrence, was trying to get his 2 star pupils to kind of unleash their anger a bit. And the reason why he chose the sleepover is because he remembers back in high school, Allie would go on these sleepovers and she'd come back and there would just be nothing but drama and conflict because people would talk, rumors would spread. So Johnny feels like this would be the perfect opportunity. And he tries, folks. I mean, he really tries to create this drama. He takes cell phones, he pretends to be Miguel, he pretends to be Robbie. But the thing is, he sucks at it. Sam and Tori are able to figure out exactly what he's doing. Tori and Sam confront both Devin and Johnny about this, and Devin owns up to it but says, we were trying to make you get your edge back. And Johnny pipes in and says, I want you guys to hate each other, but in a friendly way. And both Tori and Sam are so disgusted that they just say, we're going to call an Uber. As the girls are waiting for their Uber, though, Johnny's plan starts to actually take effect. The girls start talking, and they start talking about their past, rehashing old things that they probably shouldn't be talking about. When Devin and Johnny step outside, they see that both Sam and Tori are about to really, really kick off a huge argument. And in the past, they probably would have. They probably would have come to blows. But these two have matured, and Sam just apologizes for what she did to Tori back in the day, and everything's squashed. No matter how hard Johnny tried to get these two girls to not like each other, they just don't fall for it. Even though it seems like Johnny failed, the next day at practice, Johnny actually came through. Tori and Sam get on the mat and they start fighting angry. They're not rivals, but they've definitely gotten their edge back. And it's something that is welcomed by both Devin and Johnny. Practice, however, gets interrupted when the big announcement comes from the Saikai Taikai of where it's going to be held. That year's Saikai Taikai will be held in Barcelona, Spain. And all the kids are super pumped to go. The only issue is the head of the council announces that only 6 students from each dojo will be permitted to attend, which means that there's going to be a lot of kids from Miyagi-Do that get left out. So now, who makes the cut? Over in Korea, Cobra Kai is trying to find their 6, and now with Master Kim's blessing, both John Kreese and Kim are able to pick out the best students that she has, and she's got some real killers. Their best student is a kid named Yoon Dong Jin. He wears this cute little patch. Their most talented guy, though, is a guy named Kwon Jae-sung, and he is a straight killer. He's raw as hell. He doesn't follow directions, but what he is the perfect candidate for John Kreese and Cobra Kai. Kim recognizes just how talented Kwon is, but she says he's just always a distraction because he doesn't follow lessons. And Kreese says, well, your grandfather encouraged me to get everybody in order, so I'm going to do that. He doesn't just punish Kwon for being a distraction, he punishes everybody. He forces the entire class to carry these big bags of sand around. Kreese knows full well that the other students are going to be pissed at Kwon for making them do this, and that's exactly how it plays out. That night, a very angry Kwon approaches Kreese and says, really, dude, you tried to get the other students angry at me? What, you think I'm afraid of them? And Kreese says, no, actually, I don't. I don't think you're afraid of anybody, but I do think that if you take your talents and that attitude and harness it, you could be the best student ever. You need to take all that anger inside you and give it purpose. He encourages Quan to break rank and see what he's made of. And Quan takes that, goes back to the other students, including June, and he mops the floor with them. He even takes that cute little patch for himself because he clearly is the top student. With Quan now considered the top dog in the dojo, he's not distracted anymore, and even Kim is very impressed with Kreese's methods. In episode 4, most of the students are very, very stressed out over which 6 people will be headed to Barcelona. But there are some students that are not stressed out at all. And they are former All-Valley champs and runners-up. So basically, Miguel, Sam, Tori, Robbie, they know that they're going. It's only a formality. For the rest of them, though, they're kind of all looking around and figuring out why they won't be going. They're kind of looking around at their competition and realizing that it's going to be really, really tough. Because they also know that Robbie, Miguel, Sam, and Tori are pretty much shoo-ins, which really only leaves 2 spots. Competition is going to be very, very fierce. And when Johnny and Daniel get together to discuss which 6 will be headed to Barcelona, even they can't agree. Daniel has Sam, Robbie, Miguel, Hawk, Dimitri, and Anthony in his top 6. He's leaving Tori out. While Johnny would swap out Dimitri and Anthony for Tori and Devin. It's pretty obvious to both of them that they're not going to be able to come to a complete consensus, so Daniel gets an idea of having an impartial person come in and judge the karate. The problem is, who do you find around that area that could be an expert that would really know what they're looking for? Daniel has the guy, he's just a little sketchy. It's the bad boy, Mike Barnes. The next day, everybody agrees that Mike Barnes is going to come in and he's going to be the impartial judge on who the top 6 students at Miyagi-Do are. He's going to be in charge. He's going to put them through the ringer. And boy, is he aggressive. He puts the students through a variety of exercises, including chasing a chicken. Obviously, this guy's a big Rocky fan, as am I. By the way, Kenny won the chicken competition. He actually caught it. There's also an endurance challenge where the kids have to hold a rock and squat against a wall. Devin ends up winning that. There's a bunch of other exercises, and he just sits there jotting down notes in his notebook. And at the end of the day, he comes up with the top 12 students. He's going to narrow it down to 6 later. But the top 12 students are Sam, Robbie, Miguel, Tori, Hawk, Kenny, Dimitri, Devin, Chris, Mitch, who now is going by Muscles, and Anthony. For some, like Anthony, they're just happy to be there. But for others, like Devin, well, she's pissed. Because she overheard Barnes giving compliments to Kenny for catching the chicken, and even for Sam and Tori for being aggressive, but she never got a compliment for her endurance test. She feels like she's not getting a fair look, and she complains to Johnny about this. And Johnny, who clearly thinks that Devin is one of the top 6, reassures Devin that Barnes is giving her a closer look. That night, a lot of the 12 students that have made it to the final 12 stick around and they continue to train at Miyagi-Do. Dimitri is no different, but Dimitri decides not to train. He's getting ready for a date that night with Yasmin. When Yasmin shows up, she can't believe that Dimitri is still planning on going to this date. Because Dimitri was a part of that crew that's just kind of happy to be involved in the top 12. And Yasmin says, "You're acting like a loser. I don't date losers. You need to stay and train and go win this thing. That's going to turn me on." And Dimitri, wanting to turn on his girlfriend, I understand why, by the way, but Dimitri, who wants to turn her on, says, "All right, fine, I'll stay and I'll train, and I'm going to make it in the final 6. And now he's got a whole different mindset heading into the next day. The next day's training is primarily going to be a capture the flag type game, but the kids are all wearing flags. You have to use your karate skills to capture as many flags as possible, and then it's going to be decided on who the final 6 will be. Before they kick off the game, Johnny goes over to Barnes and says, "Hey, make sure you're taking a look at Lee." But Barnes doesn't take kindly to that. He doesn't want to be pressured to take a look at one student over the other, so he kind of dismisses Johnny. But during the competition, Johnny continues to point out Lee, and it gets to the point where Barnes has to look at him and say, "Dude, back off." And while Johnny and Barnes are having this conversation, Barnes is missing Lee actually perform and do well. And as soon as Barnes looks at Lee, she's getting flags taken from her. It's very, very frustrating for Devin. At the end of the competition, it is clear to Barnes that the top 4 are Miguel, Tori, Robbie, and Sam. The other two, he's going to go back to his notes and he's going to decide that night who those people are, and he will let everybody know the next day. But for Johnny, he can't wait for the next day. He has to find out that night. He goes over to Barnes' shop, and at first he apologizes for being a little bit aggressive towards Devin, but it doesn't take too long in the conversation for Barnes to figure out that the real reason why Johnny's shown up is because he wants to know if Devin made the cut. And Barnes says, no, she didn't. In fact, she was one of the worst students that you have. These two alpha males start exchanging insults, and it's not too long before they're throwing elbows at each other. And what's really stupid is they're doing it near an active table saw. I mean, this is a word to everybody out there. If you're going to get into a karate fight with somebody, make sure the table saws are turned off. It's just a recipe for disaster. And luckily, no limbs were cut off in this scene. But at the end of it, Barnes is shocked because Johnny comes out on top. I mean, Johnny kicks his ass. It gives Barnes a newfound respect for Johnny, and he says, you know, I was really just looking for a fight. I wanted to get that aggression out, but you're probably right. I'll go back in my notes, and I'll give Lee a fair shake. The next day, when it comes time to find out who the final two going to Barcelona will be, Barnes calls everybody into the forest. He announces that he went back in the night and he looked and gave everybody a fair shake, and what he decided was the competition is way too close to call. So he's hidden 2 flags in the forest. It's a no-holds-barred competition. Go find the flag and return it, and you're going to Barcelona. That means people like Dimitri, people like Kenny, people like Devin, they all have a shot at going to Barcelona again. Barnes gives everybody about 5 minutes to prepare, stretch, go to the bathroom if they have to, and then the competition will kick off. For Devin, you would think that this news would be good, but it's not. She's worried. She looks around at her competition and she realizes that people like Kenny, they're faster. Dimitri's bigger. Hawk is Hawk. She's worried about her chances. Johnny, though, gives her a pep talk and reminds her that she is a true badass, and she needs to get ready for this competition. The competition, though, seems to be secondary on Dimitri's mind. The main thing on his mind is MIT. He's applied for early acceptance. He's really excited about it because he and Eli have been talking about going to MIT since they were in middle school. MIT is something that Dimitri has not shut up about, and it's really annoying to Eli. Because after they went to the local college, Eli realized that he had been so set on MIT that he hadn't given any other schools a look, and he wants to. Not like he wants to go to that community college, but he figures that he probably should give some other schools a shot. He, though, didn't know how to break it to Dimitri that he hadn't applied to MIT yet. So right before the competition kicks off, and Dimitri is questioning Eli on whether or not he's subscribed to the MIT robotics emails, finally Eli says, dude, I didn't apply. And he starts to explain himself, but Dimitri is so upset about it that he doesn't want to hear it. He feels like it's been an act of betrayal because they agreed to do this years ago, and now, well, Eli's backing out. And no matter what Eli says or how he tries to explain it, Dimitri's pissed. They both go their separate ways because they have to get ready for the competition. And when the competition kicks off, it is a fierce battle to the flags. Devin is able to get one of the flags, but it's only at the expense of Kenny. And it wasn't like Devin defeated him with karate. Kenny was done in via X-Lax. Somebody spiked Kenny's water bottle, and it forced Kenny to run back to the camp where he didn't quite make it to the porta potty in time. It was very, very embarrassing. Kenny is convinced that it must have been Anthony because in the previous day, he got a cheap shot in on Anthony. He busted him up. He gave him a bloody nose. And while he was apologetic, the bad blood is still kind of simmering. It's still there. So he was convinced that Anthony's revenge was to give Kenny spiked water. But it actually wasn't Anthony at all. It was Devin. Devin wanted to go to Spain so bad that she cheated. And she is very relieved when she hears Kenny cursing out Anthony. As for the other flag, that came down to Dimitri and Hawk. And Dimitri was certainly not over the whole MIT slight, and he takes it out on Hawk. Hawk takes it a little easy on Dimitri, and it comes at his expense because Dimitri is able to kick him down, grab the flag, return to camp, and Dimitri will be headed to Spain. As everybody's heading to the cars to leave, Johnny and Daniel meet up, and Daniel says, Johnny, you feeling good about this? I mean, Hawk's not going, and we both know that Hawk should be going. By the way, I heard about your little fight with Barnes. You just had to eagle fang your way to what you wanted, huh? And Johnny shoots back, Yeah, even with the Miyagi-Do patch on my back, I'm going to fight for the people I care about. And Daniel throws his hands up and says, look where that got us. I mean, do you honestly believe this is our strongest team? To which Johnny says, yeah, I think they can handle anything. And Daniel looks at him and says, I hope you're right, because we have no idea what we're up against. In episode 5, all the kids head to Miyagi-Do that day for practice. Eli, Dimitri, Sam, and Miguel start talking about their college decisions, and Miguel's a little stressed out because he hasn't heard from Stanford yet. And when Eli tries to make him feel better by saying, well, Dimitri hasn't heard from MIT, Dimitri cuts in and says, oh, yeah, no, I did. I got in. And then he just starts gaslighting all of them, making stuff up, saying, why are you guys look all surprised? I mean, I worked my ass off to get into MIT. And then he throws all his vitriol at Eli's direction. To say Dimitri's a little defensive right now is an understatement. The two other people that are over in the corner training are Tori and Robbie. And Tori had a really interesting morning. She headed to the hospital to get the latest on her mother, and her mother is doing much better. So Tori was really in a good mood when she left the hospital, but then she ran into a familiar face in the parking lot, John Kreese. Kreese wants to get his champion back, and as Tori tells him, I'm a champion, but I'm not your champion. She tells him to pound sand, kick rocks, and leave her alone. She has no interest in joining any team he's got going or ever talking to him again. She doesn't want the word to get out that she's still in contact with John Kreese, so she makes Robbie swear that he won't tell anybody about this interaction, and Robbie says, yeah, no problem, I'll keep it under wraps. As all the kids gather for that day's lesson, there is one noticeable absence, and it's Kenny. Nobody's heard from him since the embarrassment of the forest. Johnny and Daniel, though, get all the kids together, and they say that now the last thing to do is to formulate the team captains, guy captain, girl captain. They think it's only fair that the top 2 men and the top 2 women go against each other. So that means that Miguel will be going against Robbie and Sam will be going against Tori. It's a rematch of the All Valley. For that day, Johnny's going to lead the training, which Daniel didn't know was the plan. But Johnny says, dude, don't worry about it. You just train them tomorrow. Don't worry, we're all under the same banner, right? Miyagi-Do. And at first it seems like it starts out like that, but Daniel isn't a fan of Johnny's methods, let's call them. I mean, in one instance, he's firing beer bottles at the kid as they try to balance on a raft. It's Miyagi-Do, but it's with a Johnny Lawrence twist. Either way, Daniel has to complain about something that night, so when he gets in front of Amanda, he starts to complain about Johnny overtaking the lesson. Daniel tells Amanda that ever since they found out there are only 6 spots and 2 captains, Johnny's worst impulses are rushing back. If Mr. Miyagi could see what he's done to Miyagi-Do, he'd be mortified. And Amanda says, well, maybe you're right. I mean, how do you really know? After we found out about Mr. Miyagi, anything's possible. But Daniel gets all defensive and he says, I know who Mr. Miyagi was, and this is not what he would have wanted. Over at Johnny's apartment that night, Miguel walks in with some unfortunate news. He got deferred to Stanford. He's looking at it like he didn't get in. Carmen and Johnny remind him that, well, it might not be a yes, but it's also not a no. This, though, makes the captaincy very, very important. If Miguel were to get an honor of captain for a Saikai Taikai team, that could really boost his chances of getting into Stanford, and he knows it. So now beating Robbie is really, really important. The next day, as he's talking to Sam about Stanford and the captaincy, the Saikai Taikai, the whole 9, Robbie walks up. Because Robbie hasn't seen Tori and he hasn't heard from her, which is super, super weird. The two were supposed to train later that day in the park, so he came to Miguel and Sam to find out if maybe they've heard from her. And they say, no, we haven't heard from her. But the idea that Tori and Robbie would be training together makes a lot of sense. So Sam and Miguel decide, yeah, we should probably train together too. That day's training, though, is going to be run by Daniel, as agreed upon by Johnny. Although when it actually comes time to run the training, Johnny feels like he's getting sabotaged. Both Johnny and Daniel are at LaRusso Auto, and Daniel stuck Johnny with the test drive clients. Johnny feels like Daniel is shutting him out of training, but Daniel assures him, no, Johnny, this is not me shutting you out, man. This is Thursday. You always do test drives on Thursday, and I, being the boss, get to leave whenever I want, which is what I'm doing because somebody has to train the kids. I assure you, it's going to be a normal training session. You're not missing much. Daniel, though, completely lied. It wasn't a normal training session. He decided to only train with Miguel and Sam. He goes in the forest and he starts doing the whole Miyagi-Do stuff. And Johnny, who is in the middle of a test drive with a client, notices Daniel's yellow Mr. Miyagi car just parked in the middle of nowhere, and he has the guy stop off. And he confronts Daniel about this, saying, dude, what the hell? You told me this was going to be a normal training session? This isn't a normal training session. Daniel shoots back, I don't have to explain myself to you. Yeah, we're a partnership in the dojo, but we're just reviewing kata out here, man. It's not that big of a deal. But then Daniel gets really pissed off because he notices that Johnny was on a test drive with the client, and that's just not a good look for his business. He orders Johnny back to the dealership, and when Johnny gets back to the dealership, he becomes Timu version of Jerry Maguire. He stands up, he says he's going to start his own dealership. Who's coming with him? Well, shockingly, nobody comes with him. But Amanda gets him off the table and into an office and asks him, what the hell's going on? And a very pissed off Johnny explains the situation, and Amanda is able to calm him down by saying it's not that big of a deal, but also letting him in on the fact that Daniel's going through a lot right now with Mr. Miyagi. They found this box, and turns out he wasn't the saint that Daniel made him out to be, so Daniel's a little bit on edge. Cut him some slack. And Johnny says, yeah, okay, I will. After training in the forest that day, when Miguel heads home, he runs into Robbie in the quad. Robbie tried to get in touch with Tori all day to no luck. They were supposed to train in the park, but it forced Robbie to train by himself. And that training by himself gave him a lot of time to do some soul searching. Robbie's finished second year after year after year. This is really his first chance to be a winner, and he knows it. And Miguel just wants to make sure that there are no hard feelings. But a couple words get said that get misinterpreted the wrong way, and it just gets awkward between the two. It only gets broken up when Carmen comes out and says, hey, I made burgers if anybody wants one. But nobody wants burgers. Everybody wants revenge. Now, this is really going to shock you, but when Daniel gets home that day, he complains about Johnny. I mean, he whines his ass off. And Amanda has to let him know, it's all right. Don't worry about it. You're making too much out of this whole situation. Get ready for tomorrow's competition. That's the important thing here. So when Johnny and Daniel get to the dojo the next day, they do have a different mindset thanks to Amanda. They both apologize for the previous day's drama. They remind each other that they are fighting for the same thing here, and they want what's best for the kids. And because of that, Daniel's going to ref the boys' fight to keep Johnny out of it because he's attached to these kids, while Johnny is going to ref the girls' fight. The only problem is, one girl isn't there. Tori's not there. Tori's been missing for a few days. And that's because after running into John Kreese and getting home that night, she found her mother dead. She's been grieving since the moment, going through a really, really tough time. But she hasn't told anybody. Nobody knows what Tori's going through. So when Tori shows up in the middle of Daniel and Robbie's fight, Devin looks at her and says, wow, you're here. Are you all right? And Tori just says, yeah, I'm fine. Robbie's able to win the boys' fight, and then comes the girls' fight. Sam and Tori have come a long way in their feud, and they do seem to be friends, but there's a different look in Tori's eye. You see a little bit of it in the fight when Tori gets a cheap shot on Sam, and Sam is very confused about this. But as the girls continue to fight to the 3 points, Amanda gets a call from the hospital because she was the next in line to get contacted about the death of Tori's mother. And she finds out what Tori's going through. And she tells Daniel, and Daniel steps in right before Tori is about to bash Sam's skull in. And he stops the fight. And no one can understand why. Tori's pissed off. Johnny's very confused. He thinks that Daniel's just on a power trip. And when Johnny says, why are we stopping this fight? Finally, Tori yells, because my mom died. That kind of changes the entire mood of everything. Most of the people there feel like this isn't a good time for Tori to be fighting. The only person that thinks that Tori should be fighting is Johnny, because it's Tori's decision. And Tori wants to fight. She says, my mom would want this right now. Let me fight. But everybody else just thinks it's not a great idea, and Daniel thinks that Tori doesn't really have the right mental state for this. Daniel tells Tori that they can do this another time, but Tori gets so pissed off, she just quits. She storms out of Miyagi-Do, and she says, I'm done. And that means that they have an opening. But before they announce the opening, Daniel and Johnny have to get into it. This has been simmering for a couple days now, and with Amanda out of the picture, the bad blood boils over into a big argument. Johnny feeling like Daniel didn't have a right to step in and stop that fight if Tori wanted to fight, and Daniel saying that's not what's best for the kids. But it culminates in Daniel punching Johnny when Johnny says that Mr. Miyagi wasn't some saint. Johnny doesn't retaliate, though. He just looks at Daniel and says, I'm going to finish this for those kids out there. But once the Saikai Taikai is over, me and you, we're done. We're through. The two senseis then head outside and announce that Hawk will be replacing Tori in the Saikai Taikai. And then they give each member of the Saikai Taikai their headbands. But Daniel notices something about the headband that he's putting on Sam. It looks really familiar. And when he's done putting it on Sam, he runs in and he checks that Mr. Miyagi box, and he finds out that Mr. Miyagi fought in the Saikai Taikai. And it was a bloody affair. I mean, that thing is, well, it's got blood on it, so it must have been a bloody affair. Now all that's left is for the kids to head to Barcelona. And when they arrive, they start eyeing up their competition. And that's when they're surprised because these 3 Korean kids show up dressed in Cobra Kai gear. And that's when they see Kim and John Kreese. And Daniel and Johnny are like, you got to be kidding me. This guy again? How did he show up here? But then they get a real shock because out of the shadows steps Tori. And that is something that literally nobody knew was going to happen. And that is the end of Cobra Kai Season 6, Part 1. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this. Karate chop that thumbs down button if you thought this video sucked. I have merch, by the way. I have like a t-shirt, grab a mug. It'd be super cool if you like bought some of that stuff. But more than anything, I'd really just appreciate it if you're just nice in the comment section. If I mess something up, it's okay. Mistakes happen. Move on. Oh, and please don't forget, sharing is caring. So, share this thing on your social media platforms. And hopefully you'll come back for part 2.